The top 8 mistakes that I see in new construction can completely destroy your profits, and I see it all the time with new investors and new builders. From not checking deed restrictions, to surprise sewer line issues, to hiring the wrong contractor. I'm going to break down the top 8 mistakes that I see in new construction so that you can avoid them for your next project. The first mistake I see way too often is that investors don't check the deed restrictions before buying the lot. This is a very common trap to fall into, as no one gives you the deed restrictions. The realtor, the seller, the title company, no one actually has the deed restrictions to give to you. You have to know how to go and find them and verify them for your due diligence. You see, a lot of people just look at the land, how big it is, and look at what is built nearby and assume they can build the same thing. For example, a wholesaler was selling a lot in a neighborhood that I build in all the time, and the lot was wide enough to subdivide into 2 lots to build 2 single-family homes. And matter of fact, just 3 houses down, someone did that exact same plan. They subdivided the 5,000 square foot lot into 2 lots and built 2 houses. So I figured, okay, then this lot shouldn't have any issues as well, since the house just a few houses down did the same thing. However, I always have my replat guy order a CPL, or city planning letter, and that spells out exactly the deed restrictions and what you can and cannot build. And he discovered that lot was in a weird situation where the subdivision ended in the middle of the street. So on one half of the street was one subdivision and the other half was a different one. And the lot that the wholesaler was selling was in the different subdivision that had a minimum lot size requirement of 4,500 square feet. Therefore, you could not subdivide the 5,000 square foot lot into 2 lots because you would fall under the minimum lot size requirement spelled out in the deed restriction. However, the house just 3 houses down was in a different subdivision that did not have that restriction. The wholesaler ended up selling that lot, and I'm sure whoever bought it had the same idea as I did to build 2 houses, and I'm pretty sure they got a rude awakening when they found out they couldn't replat the lot. Another example is that I had an investor wanting to build a duplex, and he was looking at lots in a certain neighborhood that are very common to have new construction duplexes. He found one at a price he liked and he put it under contract. However, on the listing, it said deed restrictions unknown. That's basically just a cop-out for the seller to say, do your own due diligence, I don't know anything about the lot. Once again, I sent the title commitment to my replat guy, and he found out with the CPL that that area also had a deed restriction on only single-family homes can be used in that neighborhood. That means a duplex, which counts as a multifamily according to the deed restriction, cannot be built on that lot. And that completely killed the deal for my investor because he only wanted to build a duplex, not a single family house. As you can see, they make it so complicated to actually find the deed restrictions to each lot. So you have to be very careful and know where to look, or at least know who to ask to get that information. Now, the second mistake that I see is people buying the wrong lot. You may come across and find a lot that's cheaper than everything else in the area and think you found the deal. However, a lot is normally cheap for a reason. The things you need to look for is the lot a weird shape? Does it have a lot of setback lines? Does it have steep topography or poor drainage? Does it have a lot of trees that need to be demolished before you can build? Those are all questions that can affect the total cost of your project. A lot of people just look at the total square foot of the lot and decide if that's a deal or not. However, there are other nuances and factors you have to consider. If the lot is a decent size, but the shape is very weird or they have very narrow frontage along the road, that can affect the entry and access to the lot, which can eliminate a lot of designs or site plans that you have that you want to build. Also, normally corner lots have setbacks on both sides of the corner for each street. So for example, here in Houston, it's very normal to have a setback of 17 or 20, 25 feet from the street to build the house. However, if you bought a 100 by 100 corner lot that's 10,000 square foot, you would lose 17 feet on each side of unusable area for new construction. So that 10,000 square foot lot really only has a usable area of about 6,600 square feet. So about 1/3 of the lot is eliminated due to setback lines where you can't build any structures in that area. Or if the lot is very low in elevation compared to the street, you're going to have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to add dirt to bring the height up to the correct height where it's above the street so that water can drain properly. Or if you're in an area with more topography and there's more hills and slopes, if you find a lot that has a pretty steep slope, you might end up spending $100,000, if not more, on building retaining walls to be able to have a flat piece of land to build a house on. Now that cheap lot isn't really that cheap anymore. And that's one of the more frustrating parts of new construction. You can buy the wrong lot and spend thousands and thousands of dollars and feel like you're losing money without seeing any actual progress. So when you're looking at lots, don't just ask what the purchase price is, but ask yourself, what can I build there? And what hidden costs may there be on this piece of land? Now, the third mistake is not looking for where the sewer and water lines are before buying the land. And this is a very, very common mistake that I see with new investors trying to get into development, at least here in the Houston area. And I actually made that very same mistake when I bought my first lot to build on. You see, I bought a lot in the heart of Houston, and there's homes all around it except on my immediate street. But I figured it's inside the city of Houston by downtown, of course there's going to be water and sewer lines on the streets. It turns out there were not any sewer lines on the city of Houston's sewer map. So I then had to pay a civil engineer $5,000 to create sewer extension line plans, and then I got quotes from plumbers, and I was getting quotes at $45,000 to extend the city's sewer line just 100 feet so that I can reach my lot to have sewer access. That's an extra $50,000 I didn't have in the budget, and it would have completely killed the deal. However, I lucked out because there was a sewer line behind my property that didn't show up on the city of Houston's sewer line map, and I was actually able to connect to that sewer line to tie in my houses. However, I have an investor that wasn't so lucky. He had already bought the land and had plans made and reached out to me for me to be his builder to build his duplex. However, when he sent his WCR letters, or wastewater capacity reserve letters, from the city, the letters state that there was no sewer line to that property. But he told me there was an old home on that property that got torn down. And if there was an old house, then there had to be a sewer line servicing the home. So I sent my plumber out, and he discovered where that sewer tap was for the lot, and he did a dye test to trace it back to where it connected to the city of Houston sewer line. So I thought the investor lucked out also. However, when the city of Houston came back, it said that the line had to be a certain diameter and size, and it cannot be concrete material. It turns out that old sewer line that serviced that old home that got demolished had a concrete sewer line. So therefore the investor couldn't use that existing line and had to extend it from the nearest intersection that the city of Houston had a newer sewer line. That investor had no idea it didn't have a usable sewer line because he assumed since there was an old home on it, it must already have sewer and water utilities. And 99% of the time that's correct. But he just got unlucky on this one lot, and it's an unexpected surprise of probably over $50,000. And now he's debating whether or not to even build on the lot or just sell the home and take a loss on the land. So always check where the sewer and water access is to your lot before buying it. Now, the next mistake I see is people buying pre-designed plans on the internet. There's a lot of websites selling pre-designed architectural plans for a pretty cheap price online. However, every lot is different. Different sizes, different orientations, different deed restrictions. So it's never a good idea to pre-buy plans when you don't even have the lot figured out. You'll only end up wasting money on plans that you can't even use. You see, for me, I always find the land first, and I always get custom plans made tailored to the lot. So the order always has to be the land first and then plans that fit the lot, not the other way around. Also, most of the time, those architectural plans are just DD or design documents. They're not CD or construction documents that are needed to submit for plans and permitting to your local city. You see, design documents just have the architecture, the style, the layout, and the floor plan. But construction documents have the electrical plans, the structural foundation and framing plans, and all the exact details needed to pass permitting. So you're still going to end up paying a structural engineer to do structural plans, a draftsman to make the electrical plans, and a plan runner to submit the plans to the city permitting office. I personally think it's always better to find a local architect familiar with local rules when doing your construction designs. Mistake number 5 is making design decisions way too late. Now, you don't see this as much for investors building spec homes for resale because you just have a generic color palette, color finishes, and you just sell it according to the plans. This is more common with homeowners building their own personal home and wanting custom touches and finishes. A lot of times, people just want the project to get started. So they say, we'll figure it out as we go. However, that's an expensive mistake. The later you make decisions, the more expensive those decisions become. You want to finalize your design and custom ideas when the architect is working on the plans at the very start, because he can easily make changes before submitting it to the city for permitting. For example, if you want to move a shower faucet to the other side of the shower, you need to do that before the plumber roughs in all the plumbing lines for the shower, because once he puts the valve and all the lines to one side, it's going to cost more money for them to come back, take it out, and move it to the other side. The same goes for outlets or lights. If you want to add accent lighting that's not part of the plans later on and say the drywall's already up, it's going to be expensive to cut the drywall and rerun wires to where you want to have extra lighting. Or if you want to make a bathroom bigger, make a closet bigger, add a mudroom, all those things, if they're done after framing, it's going to cost you a lot of money as they have to reframe and change the design of the plans. Any design changes or layout changes can cost you lots of money in change orders if you do them too late. So you always want to spend the time up front to make sure that the design is how you like it before you get started. Now, mistake number 6 is hiring the wrong builder or general contractor. And out of all the mistakes in this video, this one will give you the most stress and headache by far. This one is all too common because it's very hard to vet someone properly. They might talk a big game, they might seem very likable and charmable, they might give you a very cheap price, but be careful. The wrong builder can make or break your project. A lot of builders or general contractors are all talk, and so many beginner investors or people looking for their personal home fall into this trap. These builders promise the lowest price or the quickest timeline, or they seem the most friendly. But make sure you actually do your due diligence and ask for referrals. Ask other prior customers if they were happy with that builder or general contractor, and ask to see their previous work. One thing I see a lot is a builder will give you a quote and it seems very cheap and reasonable, but by the time you finalize the contract, the price is way higher. Or during the construction process, they'll do a lot of change orders and they'll say, hey, this wasn't included in the bid. This is a change order. This is extra. And it then racks up your costs. Or a builder might be fine, technically a good builder, but they don't communicate. You don't know where you're at the project, you don't know the progress, the timelines, and you're in the dark on the entire project. You see, the wrong builder or GC won't only cost you money, it will cause you so much headache, so much stress, and so much anxiety. And it's really just not worth it. And the bad part is, you're stuck with them for the entire process. It's like a marriage. It's almost impossible to divorce a builder once the project has started. Now, the next mistake is believing the timeline you want versus reality. I get it, delays are annoying, delays are expensive. However, when it comes to home building, there are always delays. Weather delays, permit delays, contractor delays. There's always some kind of issue that will delay the project timeline. So I would always budget an extra 20 to 25% on your projected timeline to be safe. So if a builder tells you, hey, the project will probably take 8 months, I would assume and just go off of maybe 10 to 12 months to be safe, so you aren't frustrated when the house isn't done in 8 months. We all know time is money, and the longer the project drags on, the more holding costs you have. And that brings me to mistake number 8, underestimating holding costs. This one is almost a hidden cost that you don't really see coming until the end of the project. From property taxes, utilities, security, temporary items, and the biggest one of all is the construction loan interest payments. These costs add up and they really snowball towards the end of the project. Most people just ballpark estimate a number when underwriting their deals and have a placeholder for holding costs. That is wrong. You want to actually go in detail and calculate every single holding cost. If you expect the project to take 2 years, go to the county tax assessor and look up how much the property taxes are for each year and double that and underwrite to that amount. For the construction loan, understand you only pay interest on the amount that's drawn. So that's going to change every month because each month you're going to draw from the loan as the project progresses. So every month, your monthly interest payment to the bank will go up and up and up. And it comes to the end of the project when the house is fully built and you've drawn the entire loan, you're going to have huge holding cost expenses paying the full amount of the construction loan every month. And then what if the house doesn't sell right away? You might be stuck holding it for 3, 4, 5, or 6 months before you get an offer that you accept. And during that time, you're going to be paying thousands and thousands of dollars for the interest payment to the construction loan. For example, my last 5-home development project, the actual vertical construction time was just 12 months. However, I spent just over $100,000 in holding costs, from security, temporary toilets, temporary fencing, to of course the biggest cost, the construction loan itself. That's a 6-figure expense that you might not be expecting. So there you have it. Those are the top 8 mistakes that I see all the time when beginners get into new construction. A lot of this just comes down to experience. And I've made all these mistakes I've mentioned in the video before multiple times. So whether you're interested in building spec homes for investment or just building a personal home and you want to save tens of thousands of dollars from mistakes, make sure to check the link below in my description for my new construction course.